Hey, it's Drew. And I'm guessing that as a podcast listener, you also enjoy audiobooks. Well, in that case, did you know the audio version of Renegade Marketing 12 Steps to Building Unbeatable B2B Brands was recently ranked the number one new B2B audio book by B2B Authority? Kind of cool, right? Anyway, you can find my book on Audible or your favorite audiobook platform. And speaking of audio, before we get into today's show, I do want to do a shout out to the professionals at Share Your Genius. We started working with them several months ago to make this show even better and have been blown away by their strategic and executional prowess. If you're thinking about starting a podcast or want to turbocharge your current show, be sure to talk to Rachel Downey at shareyourgenius.com and tell her Drew sent you. Okay, let's get on with today's episode. Hello, Renegade marketers. Welcome to Renegade Marketers Unite, the top rated podcast for B2B CMOs and other marketing obsessed individuals. Alrighty, folks, you're about to listen to a bonus huddle, a specially curated huddle that we run once a month with experts sharing their insights into the topics that are most important to our CMO community. The expert at this particular huddle was Nicole Leffer, AI advisor for CMOs at A Catalyst LLC. She joined us to discuss how CMOs can use generative AI to improve productivity across their department today, not sometime in the future, but today. All right, speaking of today, let's get to it. I'm really thrilled to introduce you to Nicole Leffer, who 19 months ago was sitting in your shoes as head of marketing for Resilia, a venture-backed startup when a layoff accidentally threw her into entrepreneurship. Now, during her time off, she started to play with generative AI tools and quickly discovered that she had a knack, not just for using them, but for teaching other marketers how to use these tools. In January this year, she set up her consultancy, A Catalyst, and has become a go-to consultant in this area. In fact, this is, I think, her third talk today. And what you will discover is that Nicole is in there and blown away by everything. There's just so much cool things happening. And the one caveat that I want to say right now, which Nicole said, is when I mentioned that we were going to record this and release it as a podcast, she said, you better release it fast because it's changing so quickly. Nevertheless, there are all sorts of things. So first of all, and by the way, and our goal is so today to be really pragmatic, how you and your teams can use these tools today to radically improve productivity. I love this. I want to share this one thing with those of you who are on camera. This is the cover of last week's Economist, and there's a sort of devil and an angel. We are not going to be talking about the ethical consequences or issues or legal issues really of it, but I want to read one quote for you. There is a technology need not be world ending to be world changing. And I think, and both Nicole and I agree, this is a world changing thing. So, all right, Nicole, how are
Yeah.
you and where are you this fine Friday afternoon?
I am great, thank you. I am in Atlanta. And I do want to just clarify one thing. I used AI on my team that I was leading for a solid year. So I have experience as the head of marketing leveraging it on my team as
Okay, there you go.
well.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Now, and speaking of credentials, you also got a credential from the Marketing AI Institute. What's that about?
So they do amazing courses. I took a piloting AI for marketers, I believe it was called, with them. Amazing courses if you're just digging in. They also, Paul Rotzer, who's the head of the Marketing AI Institute, has a really great podcast as well. They have a great Slack community. So it is a great place to learn a lot about AI and marketing.
Cool. I may ask you for an introduction so that we can get
Absolutely.
him to do a book, but because again, we could probably do this 6 weeks from now and have a pretty radically different conversation.
Yeah. And we have super different perspectives too, just because we're using it in different ways and have different experiences. So they're great over there. Highly recommend following them as well.
Okay. So I promised, because we've already had a broad conversation about generative AI, that this would be super pragmatic. And so how CMOs can use generative AI right now, I would say 99% of the huddlers have played with ChatGPT. Okay. And they're thinking about it for content creation. So Share with the group here, because you and I talked about how you create blog posts.
Mhm.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So first off, I just want to say, like, you can use AI for basically anything at this point. We're getting maybe not 100% of stuff, but I have started going to this perspective of how can I use AI before I start anything instead of trying to think of what can I use AI for. I flipped that script and it has made a huge difference in realizing the full mass potential. But if I want to create something like a LinkedIn post or a blog post or thought leadership, what I am doing is it's really my thinking. And I think that's one of the big differences between the people who are getting great content out of AI and tools like ChatGPT versus those who are not very impressed with it. Are It's really using your own ideas and your own thoughts, feeding that in one form or another, whether that's past content, whether that is recording a voice memo, just rambling about your ideas and your thoughts, uploading and getting a transcript of that and putting that in to base your content off of. I love doing that. Or giving yourself like podcast transcript, anything like that, but your own ideas, your own thoughts, and taking that. We'll use ChatGPT for the example, since that's what most people are using. I'll write a prompt that tells ChatGPT exactly who it is. You are the world's best copywriter for blogs with an expertise in getting people to read and share this content and really get high value from it. And then getting into this is what you're going to write a blog post about, giving it the ideas that you want it to be based on, and giving it the voice you want it to be in. So providing that with the description of how you write that you've already trained the AI on how you write and giving it that description, giving it the audience you're giving it to, and then taking it step by step. Ask it to write the outline of this blog post first, then ask it once you've got that, you go, okay, now write me section 1, then write me section 2. So you're not just saying, write me a blog post about AI. It's write me a blog post with my ideas about AI in my voice for a CMO audience who's looking to incorporate this into their teams, and you get a completely different output on that.
I'm going to recap real quick. So it's all about the prompts, starting with it's your ideas. You're telling who you're talking to and who you are and the outline, and then fold it over. One of the things that you and I talked about was voice and how you train it to speak in your voice in such a way that you have a prompt that describes your voice. Can you be clarify on that? Because I that's one thing I missed. I just hadn't picked up on.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I recommend doing is write a prompt that says something along the lines of like you are an AI that specializes in analyzing text for voice and tone and style and all of these kinds of things. Using natural language processing, which the AI will know what that is. You can call it NLP also. And I want you to analyze the text below that I'm going to give you. And I want you to write a description of this voice for a future AI system to be able to write based off of. And then you're going to give it your text. But and you don't want to give it all different kinds of text. You want to give it a style of blog post that you want to be able to mimic, or a style LinkedIn post you want to be able to mimic, or your website copy, whatever it is. So say we're doing a blog post, you would write that prompt, give it an example of a blog post, hit send, and it's going to come back with a paragraph that describes the style, the tone, the type of language, all of these elements that you would never be able to describe for yourself of what your writing does. And then you're going to save that paragraph of text. And when you go to write a blog post, you're going to say, write in this voice, and you're going to give it that context of how you want it to write as
Okay,
part of the
so
prompt for a blog post.
and by the way, this is just so you're going to have a Google Doc or whatever you use, and on the
Mhm.
Google Doc, and this is going to be your prompts Google Doc. And the one is your brand voice, which you have trained it to do and describe it. That was the part that I was missing. It
Yes.
was like, no, you can't say, hey, talk like Jerry Seinfeld, because it'll go, hey, I'm Jerry Seinfeld. Ha ha
Yeah.
ha. That's it. Okay, before we keep going, Kay Moffett, you raised your hand. Take yourself off mute and ask Nicole a
Yeah,
question.
I think that was this is fascinating. So I think that was my question is, are you feeding it your own data? 'Cause to
Yes.
me, AI, it's all about the data and like garbage in, garbage out. And that's sort of partly what's creepy about ChatGPT is you don't know what data it's pulling from. So I guess I didn't realize you can feed it your own data.
Yes.
Oh,
So you can, like, I'll just copy and paste it in. You can't, it does not have internet access. So you can't just give it a link and say, go to this blog post. You need to actually copy and paste the blog post in. If you tell it to
mhm.
go to a link and it gives you anything back, it's just making it up. Or
Right.
it's telling you what was on that page prior to
Wow.
September of 2021.
Okay. So
So,
how do you
so
do it with source materials, I guess? Like if
when
you're
you
like,
say,
I want to write a blog in this voice
mhm,
about marketing AI, like
yeah.
where, and you want it to use your
So
transcript voice.
So the first thing you're going to want to do is before you even get into trying to write a blog post, you want to train on your blog voice. So that's what I was just saying. Like you write that prompt, you share your blog post, and it's going to give you this description back. So you'll want that voice description that you just keep in a Google Doc that is for blog posts. If you do different styles of blog posts, have them for different styles of blog posts. Have one for LinkedIn posts. Have one for website copy. It's not just one voice for your brand, but it's all the different applications of your voice, assuming you write in any bit of a different way on a different source. So just keep all of those voice paragraphs in a Google Doc, a Word doc, however you want to store it, an Excel file. And then that's just going to get dropped in as part of your prompt. So your prompt will say, write this blog post in this voice. So that's just like one paragraph of your entire prompt that you're dropping in. But you're not going to do that every time because you've already made it and you're just copying and pasting that paragraph.
So let me
Now,
interrupt you for a second. Because this is everything that we're talking about is about the fine art of prompt crafting. And this
yes.
is the skill that we're all learning. And Nicole is way ahead of us. But so we now have a prompt that you're going to
Yeah.
use. My LinkedIn voice, because I've already trained it, is X. So you include that paragraph, right?
Yeah, so that just goes into your prompt. It's like a snippet
Perfect.
portion of your prompt. And then you're also going to say, like under that, it would say, now use the following ideas to draft your blog post and then put the ideas. It could be bullet points from a slide deck. It could be a transcript of a voice memo you've recorded. It could be part of a transcript of a podcast you recorded talking about this idea. Could be an ebook you wrote or a blog post you wrote. You know, it could be a blog post and now you're turning it into a LinkedIn post or something like that. But that's just all going in that prompt initially. So in a typical prompt, I'm telling it the type of expert at content creation it is. I'm telling it the voice to write in, and I'm telling it the content to write about. And then a lot of times I'm also telling it who it's talking to as well. So this is for CMOs or this is for whatever you sell to.
You and I talked about was it yesterday, or the day before, but we talked about you do voice recordings and then you send it over to Whisper. And then from Whisper, you copy it into
Mhm.
ChatGPT. You can't right now just put voice recordings into ChatGPT, can you?
Not today.
Not today. Stand
Not
by.
not today, but let's stand by because this
Yeah.
stuff is evolving very, very quickly. So I don't know. I just got a new thing that popped up, an alpha test that's in my account, and I can now upload if I'm working in this one plugin section, I can use images and I can use CSV files. So I'm not going to say that very soon that's not going to be possible, but right now you have
Today,
to.
at
Yeah,
this
not today.
particular, not
Yeah.
today. Okay. But there are so many good, and by the way, the interesting part here is you don't even need a great transcription service anymore. You could use probably just, use your phone and dictate into your phone and email that
Yeah.
to yourself and upload because the system is going to rewrite what you put in there anyway.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like what I'll do is I'll just be on a walk and I'll have an idea about something it's coming up. And I'm like, this would make a great LinkedIn post. So I'll just whip out my phone and I'll start rambling. Like it would not, if you were listening to me or you listened to that voice memo, you'd be like, what on earth is she talking about? It is just stream of consciousness, 2 or 3 minutes. I will email it to myself and transcribe it in Whisper as soon as I get home. They just added Whisper to the OpenAI Zapier integration. So you could actually set it up to email to yourself and get an email back transcribed if you wanted to.
So wait a
So
second. So this is, I've dictated it to myself. I email it to the system then, and will then go into Chat GPT.
It wouldn't go to
Okay.
ChatGPT.
All right. Fine.
No, but but
But we could write
it
that
would,
code.
you could have it to email back to yourself. So like you just emailed it to you, it
Right.
transcribes it and email it back.
Perfect. Yeah, got it. I got it. So you dictate it, it goes somewhere, it comes back into email, you
Mhm.
copy that, you put
Yeah.
it into your prompt. Got it.
I'm not doing that yet, but like it's possible.
Okay. So we were talking about LinkedIn posts for a second, and while we're there, a lot of folks use emojis, and I just never occurred to me that I could say, "Hey, ChatGPT, put emojis in there." How does that work?
It, if you actually, if you tell ChatGPT it's the best LinkedIn writer in the world, it will go emoji crazy and it will automatic. I've noticed that apparently ChatGPT thinks the best LinkedIn copywriter in the world uses emojis every 2 sentences. You can just like literally say, give me, use emojis as part of your prompt. Or I like to do like emojis as part like bullet points in my LinkedIn post. So I'll give it the bullet points or it'll have crafted it and I'll be like, give me 5 options for bullet points that are emojis that are representative of each sentence. And it'll give me the options that maybe I symbolically never would have thought of. And they're really, really good.
And,
So you can do
that's a really important point, which is get yourself options. It only takes a second. And rather than taking that first draft, you can say, give it another one. Okay, Dave Borman, Associate Analytics. Dave, what's your question?
I just want to make sure I was following the very beginning. So if I have a blog post and I want it to learn my voice, I tell it, hey, I want you to understand the following my voice from this following blog post, and it
Mhm.
will create some written language that says, this is your voice. And then I save that into my Google Doc. And
Bingo.
when it's time for me to ask it something else, that is one of my prompts that I drop back in and say, write in
Exactly.
this voice. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
We promised this would be practical, and that
Yeah.
is so. Last week, you released a video demonstration about the importance of editing your prompts
Mhm.
versus the output. And that's really hard because I must admit, I see the output and I go, oh, I can edit that. I can work with it. And why is it so important to just keep tweaking your prompts?
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons. The way ChatGPT works, when you type in, what most people are going to do is they're going to type their prompt, they're going to get a response, they're going to say, I don't like this, I want it to change this. And then they're going to tell ChatGPT in the next thread to change this. So say you typed in, tell me what the sky looks like, and it gives you the sky day, night, cloudy, sunny. It gives you every option. And all you really wanted was, what does it look like on a clear blue day, clear sky day? And most people are going to just say, no, edit it to only tell me on a clear sky day. Well, ChatGPT remembers everything you've said and everything it said up until that point in the conversation. And if you do that, what's going to happen is 5, 10 messages down, you're going to be going back and forth. And suddenly it's going to be talking about nighttime again because it had talked about night at the beginning. And now it's going to be talking about night, even though you've clarified you only want to be talking about day because it's going to get confused. Versus if you see this answer, you go, oh, I just wanted it to be the sky on a clear blue day. You can, there's like the thumbs up and thumbs down. I think everybody kind of knows where those are. If you go over your prompt, when you hover over it, a little pencil and paper is going to appear. You can't see it until you hover over the prompt. And you're going to click that pencil and paper, and that edits your prompt. And so what it's going to do is you would go up there and go, just change it from tell me what the sky looks like to tell me what the sky looks like on a clear, blue, sunny day, and save and submit from there. Now you're not going to have this thread. You're just going to have that be your first prompt. It's not going to remember that it said anything about the sky. You can always get back to your initial prompt. There's like left and right arrows on the left side.
Right.
If you take one thing away from a conversation with me, the number one game changer you will have in your ChatGPT outputs is editing your prompts to change your outputs.
And by the way,
the best habit you can make.
And again, bingo, lights going off. Never occurred to me to go back and change the original prompt. Very cool. Paige O'Neill, you have a question. Paige.
Hey,
So, Nicole, I know that it remembers everything and understanding the importance of changing the prompts. I'm just curious because, you've got multiple threads going with it. Is it remembering across the threads or just within that individual thread?
It's only going to remember in the thread that you're talking
Okay.
on right now. So if you like flip back, it's going to remember anything that's on that thread.
Okay,
If
great.
you kind of go down, so it's a little confusing, but it's like if
Yeah.
you can see it on the screen, if you scroll up, that's what it's remembering.
Okay.
You
Okay,
give it a
thanks.
moment.
So I want to. There's an Uber issue here, and in fact, we're working to test this thing because I've heard the stories of if all your content was just created by ChatGPT and like it didn't what you just said, write a blog post on how to be a better CMO, right? Just went to ChatGPT and did that, and your website just was 100% right out of it. That Google would tank you, and I know at least
I don't think that's true.
you don't think it's true. There's at least one case that we know that it's true.
Well, okay. Google will tank you from the fact that you gave it no original ideas and it's all basically, recycled ideas and there's no
Right.
thought leadership. And so like it's not written for humans. So because it's not written with a human reader in mind that you've taken the time to create good content, then for that reason, Google's not going to be happy. But if you mean because it's AI generated content, Google doesn't care. Like if you create good AI generated content, Google has explicitly said AI or human, we don't care as long as it's good content. And
Interesting. And somehow or other, it's deciding that based in all the ways that the Google algorithm raised. Dave, did you have another question? Come on by.
Thank you. So can you help me tactically around turning a webinar into either a blog post or an ebook? Like what are the steps there?
Yes, absolutely. That's one of my favorite things to do. So I love that you asked this question. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get your transcript of your webinar and take that transcript and you're going to just write a post prompt that basically says, I want you to read this below. Do not do anything. Just reply read when you're done. And put in whatever the maximum, you're going to just kind of have to get a feel for how much you can put in before it times out. But give it, so I would also tell it this is part one, because usually a webinar is going to take multiple parts. So read part one of this webinar, do not do anything. Tell me when you've read it. Put in the first chunk. Going to say read and say, read part two of the webinar explicitly again. Do not do anything. Tell me when you have done it. Say read. Do that until you get all of the parts and then put in your prompt that says, utilizing the content that you have read in part one and be explicit in part one, in part two, in part three, and in part four of the webinar transcript, and only that content. We're going to come up with 5 ideas for a blog post that could be based off of this content exclusively for this market, whatever it is. Get those ideas. Pick one that you love. Say, this is a great blog post. I love this idea. Now go back to the line that you did it on and edit the prompt where you asked for the brainstorm. And that's important because you don't want to remember the other ideas when it starts working on your post. So just go to the edit post and say, utilizing all of those parts above, you're going to write a blog post, or I would start with an outline, write a blog post outline with the following topic, write the outline for this audience. It's going to be written in this voice. Let it generate that. Once you have the outline, then go to the next one because now you want it to use the outline. Tell it to write the blog post, make sure it knows the voice, give it the voice again. Just don't assume it's going to remember it, and generate your blog post. I would also ask it to format in Markdown. If you write in, please format this in Markdown so it's easy to read. You'll get headings, you'll get subheadings, you'll get bullet points, all of that. So it is really ready to go.
Format in Markdown. Another one that it just like, boom, boom, format in Markdown. Chip Rogers, what's your question?
So that's really interesting. So when you do you said with the transcript, you block it. How do you give it indications from one to the other?
I'd say read part one of this transcript.
Do you give it a name at the top or something, or you just drop it in
I
there?
just call it part one. Like, like part one, part two, part three, part four, however many parts. If you start getting past probably like 3 parts, you may want to tell it again at the end of the part you've pasted in. Do not do anything with this. Just tell me when you read it, respond with read, because it can forget. Like sometimes it just gets a little confused and forgets, and sometimes it'll try to finish your transcript for you after a few times. You can, if it also starts to do that, just hit stop generate. Like you're going to tell very quickly, just hit stop and edit your prompt and remind it, like, do not do anything. Just respond with red.
Speaking of that, how often do you have to say, don't make anything up? Don't answer a question that you don't know or something like that?
Oh,
Yeah,
it'll
they're
always
talking
make
about
things
these
up.
hallucination.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
that's just a given of using these tools. It doesn't matter if you tell it not to make things up. It doesn't know it's making things up. It's just the nature of how it works.
Right.
So I think it's, instead of say don't make things up, I think it's better to say only use ideas specifically contained in this transcript, only use ideas here. But you have to assume anything you haven't explicitly given it, you have to fact check with these tools. No matter what you've said in your prompt, you do not ever assume that it is actually true. And it can be so sneaky about how it gets in that stuff that's not factual. Even of your own stuff, you want to make sure like it's matching with what you really want it to say. But I've seen it literally like make up research papers attributed to real researchers at real research institutions. And the only thing that's made up is the name of the paper and the actual research. But
wow.
But people have worked together, done research together in that field. Like it is very believable until you dig in and go, I want to read the paper.
So here's what's going to happen for everybody who's assuming you're here right now. The minute this is recorded, it is going to go up to, we're connected to Otter. We're going to get that transcript from Otter, which will be done in a second. We'll take that transcript from Otter, feed it in to the ChatGPT. We'll say, read this and create an outline based on this thing so that we can send out a instant recap on this thing. What else would we need to do to make sure that this recap is incredibly valuable and will remind everybody in this podcast, in this conversation of what we've talked about?
Honestly, I think you just nailed it. That's really probably all you need to do. I would double check it, make sure, do I remember actually hearing this? Like, is the things that are in here like actually things that were said? Right. But it's, it shouldn't be any extensive time commitment as long as you are using your own transcript.
Now, of course, I've already asked ChatGPT to write our entire conversation beforehand and anticipate this, so it may have it done beforehand. But no, seriously, it's really kind of amazing. And what I want to help everyone think about is we're not thinking yet broad enough about the applications here because we're used to creating content in a certain way. And this is suddenly changing this. And so I want to shift gears just a little bit. Unless Chip, you had another question?
So actually just two comments. One is that I actually, and I'm not sure, we just relaunched a month and a half ago, launched a new website with 45 pages, and we used ChatGPT to write all the meta descriptions and just put the links to each of the pages and said, write meta descriptions. And they were beautiful. I mean, they needed to be changed. So somehow it's got access to that content on the web.
It doesn't. It's really good at making things up. And it's really sneaky. So if it saw your stuff, like your website probably existed prior to September of 2021, I'm guessing. So it knows like what you used to put out.
So it may have looked at old content.
So it would have looked at old content. It would have looked at the URL slug. So you gave it a slug, which probably maybe had a page title in it, but like you already optimized that URL to have those keywords for that page.
And we did use a lot of the same slugs for SEO purposes to try and, even though some of the content changed. So
yes,
it may have been looking at old pages.
If the page was there, then it was probably thinking about what used to be on the page potentially. But the most likely thing it was doing was going, I know this brand, I know this website, I know the kind of content they put out. This URL says all of these keywords, those keywords together tend to be content about this. Now let me write it based
something
on that.
That's
but
interesting.
It's not because it actually went to your page and read that information.
Yeah.
It's because it was
sneaky.
It's sneaky. It's really, really, really smart.
Yeah.
Like, unless you were using the browsing plugin, which very few people have access to right now.
The other comment is that what I do a lot of times when I ask things, then I'm like, it'll come up with something and I'll say, write it more informally, or use keep iterating.
Mhm.
I know, Nicole, you're suggesting like editing, but
So
even just iterating, just like have a conversation with the AI.
iterate the
Yeah.
same way, but in the edit instead of as a conversation.
Yeah.
So if you want it more formally, edit your prompt to be the exact same thing, but write in a formal tone.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is based off of your output to get what you want it to become out of that initial prompt. And then so if you then want to go, okay, now I want what you've just created here, exactly what you've just created here, and I want you to turn it into another format, that's when you would go into the more conversational. So my threads used to be a mile long, and now they're usually not very long, not very many back and forths because I'm doing it through the edit, but the actual final output is so much better.
This is a
So
new training thing that we're all going to have to think about.
yeah,
Because
it's the next step in the process
Right.
is usually, I mean, on an occasional thing, I'll be like, oh, change it like this in the chat,
Right.
just, depending on what it is. But in general, it's really what would be the actual next step in the process versus just changing what we've already
Right.
got. And that's what you go to the next step in the chain of thought for. And that's because later in the thread, otherwise you're going to get confused hallucinations happening.
Okay. So sorry, Chip, we're going to kick you off and we're going to bring in Janet Jaiswal, Cloud Beds. Janet, come on down.
So, Nicole, a quick question for you. One of the things that we do when we're using ChatGPT specifically is turning off, the learning mode, the history of the information we feed, just because we have certain policies inside our
of
company
course.
for using it.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing that with everybody so other folks also know that if they put something in there that's kind of sensitive, specific, whatever that is, that it not go out there into the ether? If you
Yeah,
will?
it's really important. And this just actually came out a couple of days ago that you can change that setting. So if you're using ChatGPT, if you don't change your settings in any way, it's going to default to that your data can be used to train the model and to make it, and it's training the model for everybody, not just for yourself. So it's not going to train it like it's going to remember your tone on the next conversation you have, but in the long term, it's helping it get better. And they offered the ability now within the settings. If you go to your settings, you can go, I think it's like more data or something, data options, data sharing options. There's a little toggle to chart that says chat history and training. And you can turn that on and off. If you turn it off, you no longer get the chat history saved on the left-hand side. So you can't, while it is off, anything you create while it is turned off, you're not going to save on the left. So you can't access it, make sure you're copying and pasting everything out. However, it's not going to save it. It's not going to keep it for ChatGPT, for OpenAI to be training with either. They're going to have it in their system for 30 days for abuse protection, but they're not training the model with it. And they're only making sure that nobody is abusing the system with that data. You can turn it on and off. I like to think about it I'm already finding myself thinking about it almost like in private browsing on Google. Because when you turn it off, you lose all of your search history. When you turn it on, you have the search history from what was before you turned it off, as long as it wasn't while it was off. For me personally, there are plenty of things I want to do with it turned on. And then anything more sensitive, anything that is not going to end up on the internet eventually, or not from the internet, then I might turn it off if it's more private. I would still recommend being aware of not putting in super sensitive data.
Right.
Even when it's
For
turned
sure.
off, it's still not the most secure thing in the entire world. We don't think, we don't really know, right? We don't exactly know, but they're not like they have HIPAA compliance.
But
and
you
stuff.
do
So
point out a really important trade-off, which I, again, hadn't done because I hadn't turned the thing off yet, is that you lose that thing. So as long as you know that, that's very cool. Okay.
yeah. And there's also could be a benefit to training the algorithm. And we don't talk about that piece of it. So I think you got to weigh out.
Right. I mean,
Right.
you're just not putting your financial spreadsheet in there and say, hey, find the, just don't put information in there that you weren't about to make public anyway. That's the thing. I mean, if you're working on a blog post, which you're about to make public, and you're using your own notes from a bunch of huddle calls, life is good because you're not worried about that data.
But anything private, definitely turn it
Right.
on private mode. For sure.
So Jermaine, I'm going to butcher your last name.
It's okay. It's Jermaine Peggy's from
Peggy's.
Village. So
Hey,
for
Jermaine,
your audience.
welcome. What's your
Uh,
question?
Thanks for having me. The comment you just made a little while back where you said ChatGPT is really good at making things up, right? It doesn't have access to the internet. It can say, oh yeah, I can just write some metadata for you really quick, just making some assumptions. It kind of raised an eyebrow on that. What do you think, based on what we're learning with ChatGPT, how we're using it, what it's good at, what it's not good at? What do you think it's teaching us that we're currently really overestimating? How much does metadata matter if it can be assumed and be just as effective?
I think metadata in the old world probably really matters. Metadata in the real world probably doesn't so much. And that is just my own guess. I think SEO and everything of how we have ever looked at it in the old world matters a lot more than in the new world we're going into, because and this is my own hypothesis just based on how these models work and where, our search is going to be run by these AI systems at some point, not yet, but like eventually these AIs are getting built into, well, these AIs can comprehend the entire picture of that website. You don't need metadata to tell them what it says. They don't
Right.
need keywords to tell them what it says. So what's going to become the new keyword and metadata is like the actual content. The idea is like the value of the entire page, because an AI can go there and read it. So I think metadata used to be really important, and like today is probably still really important, but in the long term, I don't know that
This,
it actually,
oh my God.
that's a guess.
And this never occurred to me, but Nicole, you made the comment that it's conceivable that the data that you're inputting and you're training it on is actually teaching it and making it smarter. And when I was having a conversation with someone earlier today, you're making a soup and now you're adding a lot of peas. Eventually, those peas and a lot of salt, it's going to get saltier. But there's a comment in our chat stream going on where one of the huddlers trained the AI to consider the company as a leading competitor to competitors, and then trained it that its company was better than the competitors. And I
Don't
guess
give this away.
I know. So this is kind of like early days, but obviously, if you think about this as a pool and the pool is this large and you add water in that says, that, you can warm it up. At some point in time, you won't be able to change the temperature of the water. But right now, at least in an individual's case, a huddler. So, all right.
When I wrote that LinkedIn post about ChatGPT being a pathological liar, I
Yes.
felt too guilty to tell ChatGPT to write that one for me. So that one was actually,
That's
I
hilarious.
felt really mean to ask
Right.
ChatGPT.
You
to
thought
write
you'd
one
hurt his
post.
feelings?
That's hilarious. Oh my God.
Cruel. It felt like just a mean thing to do.
Oh
to
my
ask him.
God. I don't think you can hurt his feelings though.
I know logically, but
Yeah. Well, that's funny because, I showed you that we created Becca, and Becca is this B2B CMO that I can't wait to share with the rest of the Huddler community. And but I don't know if we can hurt her feelings, but we'll see. But because there could be, that's not a great answer, but Becca, you could do better.
yeah. And I think it's like, I'm Southern, so you have to be polite and nice and not hurt feelings, but also like they may not know now, but what if that data is all being stored and,
Yeah, there you go.
future?
Yeah, you were the one who said bad things about me. I'm coming
Yeah,
after you.
exactly. You got to stay nice, be polite.
So how, given the speed at which this is changing, and obviously we've spent most of this time, and I'm glad, frankly, that we're spending all this time on ChatGPT, because there's so many other things, and we're obviously, to the Huddler community, yes, we are going to have to do a separate one on visuals, and soon we will be talking about doing a separate one on video and audio and everything else. But for now, let's have some fun and just talk about crazy ass use cases that you've been doing. You talked about something that before we got on tonight about Python. And so talk a little bit about what you were doing there.
I just actually today got access to the alpha of the code interpreter, which is not very, very low chance this is in your ChatGPT yet. I was on the wait list and I got off the wait list for this. And I was going in there and I was having it create code for graphs and stuff like that. So it was like writing the code and then creating the graphs and letting me download it. But then I was like, I wonder what else I could do with this. I was giving it lets you upload things to it on this code interpreter. and it let me put in an image. So I was asking it to turn an image into like rainbow colors and crop it into a circle and give me so I could re-export it. And it let me do that. And then I uploaded a Mid-Journey image of a monkey throwing money and asked it to turn it into a GIF that like flashed and changed colors. And it did that for me, that I could export it out and download it. It let me, yeah, I know. I'm done having talk, like my mind is exploding because it happened like right before we got on here. I told it was the world's best Python artist that was an expert at drawing images and creating art with Python code, and asked it to make me an image of a waterfall, which was awful. It was not a waterfall. You would not have recognized it. But then I said, can you make me an audio file of the sound of the waterfall to go with it? And it gave me a 5-second audio file that I downloaded out that actually sounded like the rush of a waterfall. Whatever is coming, I don't know exactly what's coming. This is new. I haven't had a chance to go, oh my gosh, what can I do with all of this? But I could see enough to go, there is a lot of really cool stuff. And this is all without leaving ChatGPT, by the way. This was like, ChatGPT was giving me a thing to push to download the WAV file and to download the GIF. And it was making a GIF from an image I gave it. So it was pretty wild.
Let me throw out a use case that very recently. So we had a whole month on personal branding. So we had a lot of recaps on personal branding, uploaded that to ChatGPT and said, okay, we got 59 minutes a week to spend on, these are some of the things that we want to do. Write a 5-week plan. And it was pretty good. It needed some work. It was pretty good. What I then wanted it to do, but I didn't know how, if it had the capability to say, create the chart of this 5 weeks on this grid. And I just didn't know how to do it. Is that, and then I went over to Mid-Journey and forget it. I was lost. Yeah. So there was no hope.
So what you were doing, like you could do right now with GPT-4 easily, and you could just ask it to format all of that into a table that you could copy and paste into Excel. And you could give it the headings you wanted, or you could ask it to come up with the table. Like you could give it as much or as little direction on that as you want to. And you can even ask it for the Excel formulas that you should be putting if there's any kind of calculations or anything.
But this was all text.
But if this is all text, you could just tell it to format it as a table that you could put into Excel.
And by the way, one of the things that I did after writing the blog post said, okay, take all those, each of those points and shorten them. Because in the blog post, it was rationalizing why you needed to do it. In the other one, it's just the instruction. This is the exercise you need to do. And so it took 2 paragraphs and turned it into a single sentence that could then go into the grid. I was 1 command short, which is make a table, but you have to know, make a table, use these headers, do the thing. It's maybe a 6x5 table that and then say that I want to export into Excel.
Yeah, and you'll have to copy and paste it into an Excel file.
I can do that.
But yeah, for something like that. The other thing you could ask it to do, probably a little different than for this, but you could ask it to format it in HTML, save that HTML to a text, like save it as an HTML file, copy and paste it into a notepad, save it as HTML, and then open it in Word and then just add any kind of formatting. So I've done that before. I actually have a cheat sheet that I made. And I did it literally I gave it my slide deck. Now I did do this in private because I did not want to be training the entire internet on my slide deck, and gave it my slide deck, asked it to turn that into a cheat sheet for me, had it write all of the content, asked it to format it in HTML, save that HTML into a TXT file or, into a notepad file saved as .html, opened it in Word, put in the columns, and it was ready. The entire project from I want a cheat sheet and I don't know what this should look like to a saved PDF that was fully formatted with my own ideas, my own content that like people are raving about. 1 hour.
1 hour. By the way, we just
to do all of it.
In our chat, we just put a link for huddlers that has this, where you can get this cheat sheet from Nicole. I have been looking at it while we've been having this conversation, and it's terrific. My guess is you're going to need to update this in a month.
Yeah. In fact, I just updated it yesterday so that it was up to date for.
And
there are definitely updates.
And so I'm looking at this and it's formatted. And so I just want to confirm that, in fact, you use the tool to help you format this as well.
Yeah. So I asked it to give me the headings and the subheadings. I told it the font colors to use for it. I probably could have put fonts that I didn't think to do that until after the fact, but I think I could have. So it was all formatted like that in HTML. It had like there's a table in it, like the way that stuff there's like
Right.
some stuff in in boxes that was done in a table. I told it what it was designing it for and asked it to do it in HTML code. So then when I opened it in Word, I needed to like I put in columns. I just, added the columns quickly. I
Right.
made sure that like there was a couple of things I wanted to change font sizes of because I needed to get it to fit. I edited it within Word, so there were some minor edits. But yeah, when I say it took me an hour, it was literally like an hour from starting, like just vague idea. I want to make a cheat sheet to a saved PDF file that I was ready to email to the people that it was for.
And this was what I would say is a substantial piece of content. I mean, there's a lot of really helpful information depending on where you are on the journey. And I think the big point of this whole conversation and the why, many of us are, the one thing that every CMO does not have is more time.
Right.
So the question that I'd be thinking about is not how do I create more content necessarily and therefore spend, now I can do content 75% faster. So I'm just going to do 75% more content. No, what we're trying to do is claw back hours. So I
Right.
guess if we were, putting yourself back 19 months ago when you were sitting in the CMO chair, because obviously there are a lot of other people in their group that could be doing this and using this.
Mhm.
What would you suggest, the key applications for CMOs specifically with the goal of saving 5 hours a week? So they might be able to do a little more personal branding,
Yeah.
or they might be able to be sane,
Yeah.
right? And breathe. So what are some of the sort of things here that we should be doing?
So literally, like, I recommend before you do anything, asking yourself, can this be done more efficiently with ChatGPT or with any AI tools? Because there is so much more than you realize. Now, at first, there might be learning curves to understanding how to do it, but I've done everything from coming up with like tracking hours of how long things take to get done. Like I just had ChatGPT the other day come up with a tracker of like how long project management was taking and put it into an Excel format. It wasn't an Excel file. It was a table that I copied and pasted, asked it to give me like tell me how to set up my sheet exactly step-by-step directions and what the formulas I should be using to have the sheets talk to each other. So the hours used in one place pulled to another. And I did an entire project that would have probably taken me 6 hours to figure out how to do in 15 minutes. Because because I went, wait, before I do this, could ChatGPT help me do this faster?
Right.
Anything like you need to do with creating any kind of content, like definitely a straight to ChatGPT. But anything you need to do strategically too, like putting it in ChatGPT to help use it as a thought partner, can go so much faster. And then you brought up the idea of personal branding from a CMO's perspective. This is a great tool to help you actually have time to do your personal branding. If you need to be posting on LinkedIn, train it on your own voice. Have your own personal ChatGPT Plus account and write your own LinkedIn post. You're on a walk, take a break, record a voice memo like I do, and use that to write your LinkedIn posts in 5 minutes in your own voice.
I'm going to give you one very quick example. So I'm not a Canva user. I had a personal project. I had to create a program, and I kept going to Canva to try to solve this one thing. And all I could find was trifold because I didn't know the language. So I go on ChatGPT frustrated and say, what is the language to use in Canva that will get me to a 11 by 7, thing that will fold once? Oh, and they call that bifold. Well, I wasn't going to come up with bifold. And Google didn't come up with bifold. ChatGPT did. Boom, found the bifold. Boom, saved the thing. So it wasn't that I was solved I still was working in Canva, but ChatGPT solved the problem.
The
I will
how
tell
to
you,
do stuff is
every interview, before I do an interview, I'll run through, give me 10 things to ask this individual. Every time, just in case. Every meeting before I go into a meeting with anybody now, it's like, what's the latest that they posted online or whatever, just something so that or 5 things that I might want to talk to about this person in their industry. So the amount of time they can do it. And by the way, I had a book club thing. I read the book, but I hadn't read it for 2 years. Needed to have a quick outline. Boom, got it, done. So whether it's
amazing.
personal time or professional time, if you're using these tools, you're going to find ways
Yeah.
to do it. How much time do you
Another
spend planning travel? Oh my God.
And another thing, when like the other day I needed to make a graph for something, and it's like, how often do we really use Excel to set up a new Excel sheet to create graphs? Like I don't do it that often. I don't remember. I have to relearn every time. I decided instead, this a couple of weeks ago, I was like, let me just ask ChatGPT if it can make me the graph. And it was like, well, I can't make you a graph, but I can write you the Python code, and you can open Google Colab and you can paste in this Python code and then download the image it makes you. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was making me bar charts. Like, if you got to drop a graph into, or, line graph, bar chart, whatever, into a board deck, like ChatGPT can do it for you. Once you have this code interpreter I got today, I didn't even have to go to Google. It just made it for me within ChatGPT, and I downloaded it. I actually made the same graph because I was curious what will happen if I do it with this program.
All right. Well, we're going to have to do a whole nother show
So,
on image creation. There's
yeah.
so much going on there. All right. So we're going to wrap it up. Give me 4 B2B. This is your prompt. 4 B2B CMOs in the voice of Nicole Leffer. Give us 2 do's and 1 don't when it comes to how B2B CMOs can use ChatGPT to be to be more productive.
Yeah. So number 1 on the do's is do edit your prompts. That's number 1 takeaway. Do edit your prompts. Number 2 is do give it your own ideas to work with, that it's creating with your own thought leadership. And your don't is do not use this as a research replacement ever. Like, do not count on this to check facts or be factual for you.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because it's a pathological liar.
It's a
Okay.
pathological liar. A really nice one.
Nicole, first I want to thank you for joining us. I've already provided your cheat sheet. People can find you on LinkedIn pretty easily. I think we included and in the show notes for this episode, we'll definitely include your LinkedIn link. Is there any other way or thing that you want people to do when they to engage you? Because you do a lot of training, right?
I do. I actually go in and I work with CMOs and heads of marketing to build out trainings that are customized for their teams. And that can be anything from a standard webinar all the way through very, very customized trainings based on your own goals, needs, content, what you need to be doing with AI tools. So if you go to NicoleLeffer.com, you can get all the info on those. And I'd love to chat with anybody who is interested in that.
Very cool. All right. Big huddles. Thanks for Nicole. We're all clapping for you. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
If you're a B2B CMO and you want to hear more conversations like this one, find out if you qualify to join our community of sharing, caring, and daring CMOs at cmohuddles.com. Renegade Marketers Unite is written and directed by Drew Neiser. Hey, that's me. The show is produced by Melissa Caffrey, Laura Parkin, and our B2B podcast partner, Share Your Genius. The music is by the amazing Burns Twins, and the intro voiceover is Linda Cornelius. To find the transcripts of all episodes, suggest future guests, or learn more about B2B branding, CMO huddles, or my CMO coaching service, check out renegade.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those Renegade thinking caps on and strong.